This is NSBEAP, our professionals chapter. As I mentioned, the last meeting of the 2021 calendar year. We start all of our meetings off with the NSBE mission. The mission is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. And as we do that, part of our professional development and succeeding professionally is our general body meetings. And we welcome you, and we're excited to go through our conversation today about Kuumba, which is a Kiswahili term for creativity. I'll explain more while we're doing that in just a moment. Our agenda for today, as I mentioned, a poll just to get a sense of whether or not we can meet in January in person. I'll go through a quick event recap of items or events that we've had since our last meeting in September. And then I'll talk about a few of the upcoming events that we wanted to share and make you aware of. One that is actually tonight. So if you all are trying to get out the house after the meeting ends, or maybe go en route while the meeting is happening, we'll share that with you as well. And then we want to talk about a call to action for folks to join and form our scholarship committee. After that, we'll do another raffle, quick kind of transition to our conversation for today. I'll introduce our panelists, and then we'll jump into the conversation about embracing Kuumba in engineering. So I'm excited to have one of our guests already on the call, Ms. Danyelle Weatherford here, and we have LaDeitra as well. I think she was going to be sharing, and then I think we're waiting for Ed to join. I think he'll join in a few minutes, but we want it to be a conversation. So if you are interested or have certain questions in mind, feel free to post those as we go through the conversation, and I will facilitate that. So, as I mentioned, we like to give stuff away. We appreciate everybody coming on the virtual space. So we're going to raffle a few Grubhub gift cards off. All right, so now we're going to transition into our guest panel introductions. I'm going to start with Danyelle Weatherford. Danyelle is the COO and founding team member of Spark Studio, Indie Sparks, Indie Artists Empower, the only woman-owned award-winning multimedia entertainment and technology company in Austin, Texas. Danyelle grew up in the bustling Southeast Texas town of Lake Jackson, a professional doer. Besides her entrepreneurial and philanthropic endeavors, she has over 20 years of professional experiences from companies such as Merrill Lynch, Apple, and the Capital Group. She has fierce strengths in strategic and creative planning, financial management, project management, business and lifestyle coaching, entertainment management, and breast cancer advocacy. She is a storyteller, no matter the capacity. Her entertainment resume reflects work from HBO, Lifetime Women's Network, Lives of Women, commercials, as well as writing, acting, producing, and directing award-winning independent films. A dedicated Bobcat, Danyelle holds a BBA in marketing from Texas State University and is currently the Chief Operating Officer for the Austin, Texas production and technology company, Spark Studios, as I mentioned. Danyelle loves a great cinnamon roll, elevating others to their potential, living in the moment, and saving the world from the ordinary. We thank Danyelle Weatherford for joining us for our conversation. Virtual hand clap.
If she likes cinnamon rolls, Mitch and Dee Dee, we're gonna have to take her to KFC in Jackson, Mississippi. She don't know nothing about what's cinnamon.
Our next guest panelist is Ed Welburn. Ed Welburn has been referred to as the man who brought beauty back to GM. A graduate of the Howard University College of Fine Arts, he was just the 6th head of design in General Motors history and the first to lead that organization on a global basis. Welburn led over 1,400 creative individuals in 11 design centers in 7 countries. During Welburn's career at General Motors, he oversaw the designs of production and concept vehicles for all of the brands of GM worldwide, including Buick, Cadillac, Chevrolet, GMC, Hummer, Opel, Holden, Wuling, and included the 2 most recent generations of Corvette. Ed was inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame in 2017, has received multiple Lifetime Achievement Awards, including Eyes on Design and the Robb Report, to name just a couple. He received an honorary doctorate from the Center for Creative Studies and is the only automobile designer to have his archives placed in the Smithsonian Museum. Today, Ed Welburn continues to create as he spends his days creating future sneaker designs for a very well-known company, develops future designs for Bolt Micro Mobility, and is the founder and CEO of Welburn Media Productions, where he has a major motion picture under development. He serves as producer on that film project. He also serves on Tony Bennett's Foundation, Exploring the Arts, which supports public schools of the arts in New York and Los Angeles. Ed judges classic cars at prestigious events worldwide and enjoys time spent with his adult children and 2 grandchildren. We welcome Ed Welburn to our NSBEAP guest panel. Thank you, Ed. Virtual hand clap. And our last panelist should be familiar to most of us. She is our media chair, but also the Chief Technology Officer at Spark Studio, author and keynote speaker. LaDeitra Lee has been involved in NSBE since her freshman year in college and joined NSBEAP in 2019. LaDeitra is also CTO at Spark Studios, LLC, a Black female-founded award-winning entertainment production company in Austin, specializing in television, film, and podcasts. Before going full-time with Sparks, LaDeitra worked at Charles Schwab, where she led the Black professionals at Charles Schwab, BPOC's Austin Employee Resource Group for 1.5 years as co-chair, winning numerous awards such as 2020 ERG Outstanding Leader Award and 2019 Outstanding Service Award. Born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, LaDeitra was initiated in Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated on February 12, 1999 to Delta Pi chapter at Jackson State University. She is an author, keynote speaker, women's health advocate, mother of 2 daughters and 2 sons, married to her college sweetheart, who was also a member of NSBEAP, Mitchell Lee. LaDeitra is also a board member of Ladders for Leaders, Round Rock High School Men's Basketball Booster Club, and Jams Connections. We welcome our media chair and beloved NSBE member, LaDeitra Lee, to our panel. Thank you all, first of all, for joining us. I was excited to have this panel because one of the things that we're doing for this year is using the 7 principles of Kwanzaa to kind of direct our topics for each meeting. And Kuumba came up because Kuumba is one of the principles that means creativity. And so when we were looking at topics, we essentially wanted to talk about the intersection between creativity and what we do as engineers and how those things sometimes come together, integrate, but also maybe clash. So I'm interested to see the perspective that each of our panelists are going to come from. And we've asked those that are in these creative spaces like automotive design and media and tech and film to kind of share their experience, number one, just being a creative, but also kind of talking about what they see as kind of the advantages of technology and maybe even having an engineer mind on their team to kind of move forward their project. So I welcome all of you to the meeting, but we want to give a virtual hand clap to our guest panel before we jump in. So as I mentioned, we are going to, I'm going to start with a few questions, but I'm going to be looking at the chat. So if you have questions or if you want to just come off mute and ask your questions, feel free to do so. So before I do that, I want to spotlight for everyone our panelists so that we can make sure.
Well, you asked us to come off mute. I'm come off mute. Ed, what's up with the car? Is that a car behind you in real life, or you got a green screen and there's an image? Talk to me. Speak to me. I'm trying to be released.
There are two cars behind me. I'm in my office at home, my home office, and
what a nice, what amazing office you have, by the way.
well, you know, I've had a long career, so I've got a lot of stuff. But 57 Corvette here, and then there's another 69 Camaro in the back. And no, this is where I do most of my creative work right here.
Oh my God. Party by your house.
Yeah, usually I've got music going, but not for this moment.
And I guess from a creative perspective, you know, I'm not gonna steal the whole show, y'all. Trust me, but I can go on this conversation for the whole hour. You had to have been involved. And if you say the last two iterations of the Corvette, it was a drastic transformation to the C8, the new 2020, to go from front engine to mid engine. Can you give a little details about the creativity involved in that? Some of the, you know, cussing and fussing matches that happened to transition from something mid to mid engine on the, so basically bring me into the boardroom of that conversation.
Well, yeah, I would say, well, the boardroom's one thing, but in the studios and the engineering labs would probably be where more of the action really happens. I would have to say, you know, with every generation of Corvette, there has been significant conflict between Corvette engineering and Corvette design. Starting with C7, that conflict really went away. I mean, there will always be some tension, but the leader of Corvette engineering, Taj, and I really struck a strong relationship. It's all about relationships because engineers and designers pretty much speak a different language. And if they're not on the same page, bad things happen. But if you can get everyone on the same page and you really get the right relationship, you can do some pretty wonderful things. And I'd have to say that both C7 and C8 Corvettes represent that. Whenever there's a bad vehicle, I can always point to relationships that weren't what they should have been.
Wow, interesting. So I'm going to start with one question that I would like for all of you to answer. And I'll start with you, Danyelle, and then Ed, and then Didi. You can answer in that order. I want you to talk a little bit about your journey as a creative in the tech space. So you can start at whatever point you feel like is most appropriate, but just like your personal experience, just so we can kind of get a better understanding of your expression of creativity and kind of where your niche is.
Okay. I think my tech space actually started in college. I was starting off, I was going to be a liberal arts major, you know, an attorney, pathway to be a sports entertainment attorney. And as we were doing our papers, we would go to the lab, and there was this company that had this Macintosh sitting in the library, sitting on the countertop. So we would kind of use every now and then for our papers. And I was programming and computer science, and dipped into computer information system side of things. And so, but I noticed something different when I started doing my papers on this Apple technology called Macintosh back then. And things were easy, a little bit easier than me having to write out a script and tell it to print. And I was amazed by the ease of use of this system. And so it got me intrigued back then. So fast forward a little bit, I went and worked for Apple later on because of that introduction. But I was always I was always interested in the combination of how the creative use and the beauty of what I was seeing in different areas was simplified by the framework of the technology. So that's a basic introduction. And so fast forward to now, I'm in the film production space. And over the years, when I first got introduced from back then to now, seeing even the same company that I mentioned just a second ago, change and facilitate how I can make something happen easier, simplified, and beautiful inside and out, made me very intrigued and further. And so I'm at a digital space right now where this Internet of Things helps me to reach a different audience in a different way. And my engineers that I'm around, my system, my programmers, a lot of different things anyway, allow me to dream bigger than I've ever dreamed before. Things I thought of when I was a little girl. I've watched this Corvette over here behind you. I've been mesmerized since I was a little girl for that Corvette, but to see the Corvette, because I hadn't liked certain parts of the Corvette as time went on, but the Corvette that I have now, I know I'm jumping around a little bit because I'm loving what I'm in presence of, because I love the new Corvette with all my heart. I've not liked the design and the engineering from the past, but I know what's going on right now, and I'm just mesmerized, and I'm honored to be in your presence, by the way. And so, and I know who you are, and so I love the ability right now to be able to take my dreams from when I was younger and see what I was thinking of, to be able to make that happen in different ways. And so being introduced to, I have to say, it was Apple, back then, and being where I am now, to be able to, in a sense, compete against something like that is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Challenging, and in the same way, it's honoring that interest that I have right now. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Anyway, I'll come back around to it.
It does to me.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it sounds like your interest was sparked from the experience. It sounds like your creative kind of journey.
It's my dad, actually. So we kind of briefly talked. My dad was an engineer. And so my dad was a mechanical engineer who was also eventually an architect. And so he was what some people tried to frame the unframeable. And he was somebody that took something that went beyond and changed as a African-American, a person in the community that we grew up with, he changed the landscape of the community that we grew up in. And so a lot of people don't know what he did and what he built around there, but he influenced a lot of the way I think and the way of where I could go. And so being introduced to little tidbits along the way of things that were outside of my purview at the time, and then going somewhere else where I am right now, and the capabilities of where we are going with that is he did a great service to me in many ways. He's no longer here, but I'm surrounded by him all the time. But yeah. And he would be honored to be in your presence, Mr. Welburn, so, because he wanted one of those cars. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, so Ed, you obviously have experience in the automotive industry and design. Like, where did that begin? Was that something
It's when other toddlers, toddlers draw stick figures of horses and houses and all of that at age 2 or 3, I was drawing cars. And at age 8, I decided that I wanted a career designing cars. And by age 11, I wrote my first letter to General Motors asking about what did I need to do to become a car designer. Was it engineering? Was it art? Was it design? What was it? And they sent me great information, and which really led me to more the art, the creative design side of the house. Now, having an understanding of the technical side, I think, has really worked in my favor as I'm creating. You're not just wildly drawing sketches of cool cars. If you understand the technical side of what it is that you're developing, it's a real advantage, and it helps you communicate with the engineering community. In far more recent years, I think the virtual tools have been so huge in communicating, what you're doing as a designer. But those virtual tools only work if you really know the people at the other end of the line. And I think those virtual tools really helped General Motors during the pandemic when the designers were working from home. But because they had that experience of working with the virtual tools, they were able to communicate a lot easier.
So Ed, your experience started very early on. It sounds like in your
Yeah.
walk, and you kind of stuck with it. Sounds like as well. But
I stayed with it. The professors at Howard University knew what my mission was, and they did everything they could to help me along the way.
So what about you, Didi? You're our engineer turned, well, still in the engineering space, but just applying it into this creative world of production and film. So talk about that journey and kind of what led you and what appealed to you.
Yeah, I guess my creativity, I guess I was the first engineer in my family. So I grew up around teachers. My parents were both teachers. And what made me go into computer science is really my parents, because I was like, hey, I'm gonna be a teacher. I love math. I love computers. I took a COBOL class in high school. It was just easy to me, and I enjoyed it. So I enjoyed doing programs. I enjoy seeing what technology could do and what, creating a computer program and seeing what you created and seeing it in action. I think my first thing I created that was super exciting to me was just a website. So creating websites for people and being able to connect with others and sharing my story on the internet. And the internet was big, and AOL, and how easy it was for us to communicate. And then, I went to Jackson State and I was on a volleyball scholarship. So sports was all around me, right? So just seeing how technology even helped us as an athlete to analyze different plays or what we were perceiving, what we were going to be doing soon, just seeing how technology helped us. And, technology is everywhere around our lives. So that creativity part, for me, has been really sports. And then I've been on the QA side as well. And then being able to, like I said, sharing our stories. I've co-authored a book and working on my solo book. So it's just amazing. Like when I got involved with Spark Studio, I'd already met Danyelle because we worked through Sisters Trying Health and Fitness. So I'm a big fitness health advocate. So we did a lot of like races and different events to bring more attention to health and fitness and women health. So when I think about technology creates that space for us to be able to communicate, network. You never know. You may be playing on a basketball league with somebody, and then how you end up working together. So technology has always just been around, I guess, in my life, but not really in my immediate family, didn't really know about it. So it's funny when you go into like computer science, and then I would go home and visit, everybody wanted me to fix their computers. And so just explaining to them so many different areas, just because you say you're an engineer, everybody has a different expertise. And what I try to share with people today is that creative piece. I think as a woman and a Black woman in technology, I think that sometimes we shy away from our creativity. We're more, I guess, in like colors and seeing like we're like I don't know, things pretty. So I've always been like in QA. So everything that was designed, I was kind of like the first customer, right? I was testing everything out, or like, hey, this need a little bit more to it. To when people start using it, they're attracted to it first. I'm attracted to how it looks. And so I don't know, I've just always been able to just naturally communicate with people on it. They didn't have to be like super technical for me to be able to communicate with them, and me to be able to understand what they're looking for and how we can really solve their problem for them. So yeah, I remember going on my first visit, in college, and I was told, I wasn't going to be able to stick with this while also being a volleyball player. So anytime someone told me that I couldn't do something, that made me want to do it more and more. So even though I changed my major while I was there on that visit to mass communication, and then when I got my first grades and I saw it said mass communication major, I immediately changed it back to computer science. So just remember, your creativity can come in all different aspects of your life. Like Ed is, loves working on cars. He knew that at a very early age. It's a lot of us that have that creative spirit and naturally creative, but we thought, oh, does this mean I need to be an artist? Am I going to be a painter? Am I going to be a hairdresser? Like, where does that creativity come? But a lot of that thought process also comes in the technology space. And it's funny when you start working and you're hands-on with it, how you see those different things come out. So yeah, so Danyelle was the one told me about Spark Studio, and that's how I ended up, here at Spark Studio. So network.
Awesome. And again, I want this to be a conversation, so I'm throwing out questions just to kind of spur. But even as you were talking, I was thinking about what you said about the making things pretty, and how sometimes the aesthetic is perhaps a challenge for engineering minds to kind of wrap their head around. And like, how do you suggest those that aren't necessarily is it the left brain? I don't know if it's left brain, right brain, whatever the term is, where the creatives are, but I know that I'm somewhere in there where I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it to the point to an extent, but then like I'm more logical, like, does it work? Like, it's defined. So how do we kind of mesh and maybe have a sense of how you view things in terms of the creative mind versus like maybe the prescriptive approach that maybe engineers are more used to?
Yeah. I want to hear what Ed has to say, because I know when I'm thinking about him designing a car, how do you make sure that the car is attractive to all?
Well,
not just because it's attractive to you. Yeah.
We could talk about that for hours and what's relevant and what, and I would always say to designers, yeah, it'd be great if this design would hang in the Museum of Modern Art, but I think it's even more important that it be in the driveways of 400,000 people, so there's beauty, and then there's beauty that connects with customers, and finding that right combination is important. What I was going to say though is that the role that engineers have is so important. It's so important. I gave a presentation once to the engineering organization where I talked about how someone who's designing a component that's way deep under the hood somewhere may not realize the impact it has on the overall styling of the car. If that component, if they decide, well, if I make it 50% larger, it's, that'll be okay. There's enough space for it. But if they do that and the hood has to raise an inch, then the seat has to raise an inch so you can see over the hood. And when the seat goes up, then the roof has to go up. And when the roof goes up, then designers want to make the car a bit longer to help the proportions, so the car, as it gets taller, needs to get longer. And when it gets longer, then the wheels look too small, so you put larger wheels on it. You put larger wheels on it, then the engineers want larger brakes. And then the weight has gone up. So then you go to exotic materials, which costs more money, and the price of the vehicle starts to elevate. All of that is because of someone working in isolation made a decision on a component that started this whole chain reaction. And so, you know, I always stress that that communication back and forth was so critically important.
Can I ask you a question? I'm curious. Is it the design, the idea of somebody coming to you and say, we want something newer, sleeker, different, and I want you to come up with that and then take it to the engineers? Or is it the engineer working simultaneous with you going, okay, we have this. This is how it functioned before. We want something to, you know, speaker, maybe to a different, get out going after the female market. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the conversation is there.
Yeah. Well, there needs to be a common vision right up front. And in the 1950s, design dominated. They'd make a pretty design and they throw it over the wall to the engineers. Okay, you guys make it work. That didn't quite work. They looked good, but the quality wasn't in the engineering. And then the pendulum swung the other way and engineers dominated, I'd say really in the 1980s and 90s. They would pretty much engineer the vehicle before design got involved. And it was impossible to make it look pretty because it was all engineered decisions that had been made. So I think there's a much better balance now where they work together, and to some degree, design will create a vision for what they want in general, but they have to have the engineers right there with them from the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the timing, right? There's these, you know, the 1950s and then the 1980s with the pendulum swing. I'm curious, for all of you, in your time in this space, how has technology and the advancement in technologies allow for your creativity and creative efforts to be expressed? Like, how's it helped? And then have there been any hindrances in terms of like just maybe losing some of the opportunity that comes when in the what I call the analog space of design, where maybe you're not using CAD or, you know, the latest software to design, where and
I'd like to hear that from Danyelle, her perspective.
You know, it's funny because I was talking to my engineers today about some of the things that we're trying to do, and for me, I'm loving everything that's happening. I love of the things are at my fingertips so much easier. And so things that, you know, I remember videotaping with the well, I forget they call it, VHS type of thing, camera. And I would go around and videotape my dad. You know, just seeing a phone, the quality of a phone, being able to turn that around is phenomenal. But we know when it comes to what we're designing and trying to scale this thing up that we're doing rather quickly to go to market, somebody can turn that sucker around like that. And that's what we're competing against right now. For everybody can do something fairly quickly. And with the engineers that are out there being able, there's so many people with such a degree of ingenuity. But that creativity part is what is not necessarily there. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily going after Mark Zuckerberg, but I would say he's kind of got that framework without the creativity, and that's what lost him for a little bit. And now that stuff is coming in and helping him out and being able to expand that in a different way. The streaming side of things, you know, talking about, Ed was talking about design and having that conversation and being on the same place with your engineering team. That's where we're at. They're asking questions that typically wouldn't necessarily happen. What is your need? That's a marketing component. And I like that, you know, product development mind is what is your need? What are you trying to do? And why are you trying to do it? Those are great questions that I love that my engineering team is putting out there, because a lot of times they don't ask those questions. And so it's kind of like that quality assurance thing that Dee Dee's talking about, mixed with the I would say the framework, the quantity of what you're trying to do in a sense. And so streaming side will scale up so quickly, and that's taking up so much space. And what we're trying to do, we can sit, my development team and I can sit and brainstorm all day long. We could go for hours. If they want to stay in scope, I don't want to be in scope. It drives me nuts to be in scope, because I can take your idea and go 50 million places with it and create different designs that can scale over here. But if the roadmap is not there for it right now, then it does not help to get what you're trying to help me as an engineer try to do. But I'm going to say this, I think engineers, science, all the STEM pieces of, I think you are artists. You're different type of artists.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're artists. And I think when engineers start to think of themselves as a different type of artist, then they will mesh with the other types of artists. And you guys are using both sides of your brain. I just think you use it differently. And so and letting go of whatever that history type of thing of engineers, not artists, whatever that is will, I think, begin to help to develop. Because gamers, to me, you know, there's all types of things, but I think that needs to be pulled out a little bit more to where people relax with that, and that crosses over.
Yeah, I think what the example you gave is probably the stigma that that needs to be. Yeah, the scope. It's like, all right, okay, all right. When are we going to come to the reality?
I always refer to them as creative engineers.
Yes.
There's nothing more stimulating than what creative engineers do, and it just inspires, I think, everyone else, the whole organization. Designers get inspired by that. They definitely do.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
a little bit more about Spark Studios, just so I guess the folks understand kind of what you all provide. It's a streaming service. So are you involved in the production of the content, or are you more aligned with like how to connect the content to your user base and like what they're interested in? And like,
so my little tagline that I say is, we help independent artists, independent creatives thrive in a digital era and connect with the communities they love. And so Spark Studios is the film production side of things. So it's kind of like the Netflix, where we have our own in-house content. We also connect with film producers and anything to help to get them to distributors. And we also pass off our product to maybe a Netflix. And so, like, we're sending something off right now to the Discovery Channel. So we do our own stuff like that as well. So the Indie Spark side of thing is a indie creative platform to help empower indie creatives. But right now we're focusing on the film productions to monetize, to get their products more visible, and connect, educate, empower, all those types of things on a platform that doesn't quite exist, as well as community. So it's kind of like taking Netflix and combining it with Facebook, and making something that doesn't quite exist at this moment. So,
well, you've got my attention. Very interesting.
It's very, very cool. So yeah, we're going after markets that have been ignored and that are starting during the pandemic, that these big guys all of a sudden said, we're interested, but we still have our stuff and we're going to produce our stuff, and kind of play with those guys. And so yeah, anyway, yeah. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. It does. I just want to give people a sense of kind of where your current ventures sit. And so I kind of want to maybe open it up to the audience to ask questions if they have them.
Yeah,
If not,
I do have one question for Dee Dee and Danyelle as it relates to, I guess, go to the startup component of it. I know that to get funding is number different pitches. So whenever you're pitching, the hardest thing that you have to do is differentiate yourselves. What is that one thing that seems to resonate with those potential investors for your company?
Would you like me to answer that, Didi, or would you like to take a stab? Okay. I start off a lot of times by saying South by Southwest, 5% of the films that go through South by Southwest and they're accepted, 5% of those films get a digital distribution, only 5%. And there are thousands of films submitted to South by Southwest. So most of those films sit back and sit on a digital shelf is what I call it, and never have a theatrical release. And so it's a lot of money sitting somewhere in a lot of people's dreams and ambitions sitting somewhere and unrecognized. And so those people are not monetizing. They're not making money for someone else, as well as they have no future if somebody doesn't take that and go somewhere with it. And so that's how we typically start that off. And so if you as an investor are interested in empowering, since we, as a Black community, there's a ton. Tyler Perry is one of those people. He's actually an independent artist. So Tyler Perry did his own thing for a while. Will Packer did his own thing for a little while. But they have a lifeline of a number of different productions that are just sitting there waiting for an audience to see them. And as Tyler Perry and these guys have proven, that there's plenty of IP and content and money to be made for our communities to grow. So that's just our community, because we're not just stuck with our community. We're helping many communities. It's global.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason I specifically asked that is I used to serve on Channel Austin's board. And one of the things that we ran into for guys giving us content was the fact that we competed against YouTube. You know, you can put it in whatever format you want, any time limit you want. It's at the drop of a button. They can put it up, upload it from their phones. Little to no, restriction. It was definitely some restrictions. So how do you compete against doing that exact same thing whenever there's potential for immediate advertisement dollars to come to YouTube compared to and completely coming back to them versus you?
So there's different things in there. So you're talking ad dollars. You're also talking about the content that actually exists as well on a YouTube. And so YouTube is existing with the big guys, as well as the guy that's doing maybe a makeup type of thing or whatever. We're not about the makeup type of thing, and the big guys are not on our thing. The little guys are kind of in there, and they're kind of stuffed in there. So their algorithm is a whole different ball game. And our algorithm goes across platform, meaning we also have film festivals that we will have on our site. And so the film festivals, you're cross promoted through the platform, which is one of the things a lot of the marketing, the smaller film productions don't have the big marketing dollars like the big guys. And so that algorithm, unless you're really, really working it, gets you pushed down. And so what we're doing is our algorithm will help you to be cross promoted across the platform. So we have a theater there, so you get theatrical release. If it's talked over there, if you're at the film festival, it'll get communicated across the platform. Your visibility goes up. You bring your community as well. Your visibility goes up. When your visibility goes up, you also get marketing to new people that are also coming on the platform. So it's a whole different ball game when it comes to the algorithm, as well as how and why you're on the platform as well, and being monetized. And then there's the ad component that's also there. So we can't talk about everything, can't go everywhere. But anyway, there's another ad component that goes into that. So it depends on what you're wanting to do. And by the way, it's not exclusive. So you can go on YouTube. So if you're wanting to, as a film producer, to go on that, then that's great. But this is a whole different ballgame when it comes to what we're trying to do for the indie community, as well as to help you monetize in a different way and build your presence elegantly.
Yeah, I find it interesting too, because or at least what I've been hearing about the big players and their platforms, their algorithms are designed to keep you on the platform, and that sometimes becomes a hindrance to basically dollars and generating dollars that go directly to those businesses. So that's interesting to see that you all have a different approach to it. Try to cultivate the ability to be cross platform.
Thanks for asking, by the way. There's a lot more to that, but thank you for asking.
Anybody else have questions or?
Yeah, Sade has a hand up, so Sade has a question.
Yes, hello. I wanted to piggyback because I think Danyelle spoke to Spark Studio having impact internationally. I noticed a trend with Netflix that their library more so expanded to reflect their international market and the watchers from all over the globe. Very recently, this was not always a thing. And when you mentioned Spark Studios wanting impact internationally, I immediately thought of two of the biggest markets as far as in film industry internationally, which is, I believe, Nollywood and Bollywood. So I don't know if either you or Didi wanted to speak to what you anticipate as being a trend in entertainment that Spark Studios could rise to the occasion and globally impact based on what watchers want to see more of across the globe that wasn't traditionally represented on TV and media with what I like to call like the traditional algorithms of certain things you only saw until like the past 5 or so years. And I also have a second question in regards to any of the panel's thoughts on NFTs, non-fundable tokens, and how there's a trend now in creators and what was normally seen as not as relevant in the technology or engineering field as far as with aesthetics and creativity, how now it seems to be a trend to where those creators are asking for and demanding more compensation for that, for their ingenuity and their creativity.
How about I divert to, since I was talking a whole lot, I'll come back around because I do have stuff about NFTs and a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm gonna divert to the other two panelists if that's okay, and come back around. Didi or Ed, would y'all like to go?
Yeah, I thought the question was maybe closer to Didi, but I could talk about it from a design perspective.
Yeah, so the first question, if I get it right, Sade, was about just basically targeting and how specific Spark Studios could kind of leverage and the opportunity to meet some of the international demand for content, right? So yeah, that one might be specific for you, Didi. Danyelle.
If Spark Studio could come in and meet the demand international, I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, so
I'm talking in circles, but what I think Mr. Ricks broke down, because like I see that trend in Netflix. I guess I'm asking for y'all, what trends do y'all anticipate as far as with the international demand that would leverage Spark Studio, which I can clearly see just being Black owned and tapping into the indie markets, but how do y'all foresee that happening for the international market and the indie market based on the demands of what people want to see? Because people always say engineering is basically finding a niche to solve an issue or a problem or a complaint from consumers or most people. So the number one thing I always think about when people watch Netflix is people say they don't have this, or they don't have enough of this, or I'm bored because they keep showing the same stuff. So I can see how an independently owned streaming service company would come in because they're closer to the ground, kind of like on a grassroots situation, and can like, that's the way they pivoted, is they're not showing this, but we're showing this, and this is why, which I think speaks to what Danyelle was speaking about, is the whole tagline or catchphrase of Spark Studios, connecting creators with their audience on a more personal level. So I know I'd like said a lot, but just more what you anticipate trend wise.
Doesn't it seem like the trends, I mean, are really changing? I mean, the Green Mile really got a lot of acceptance on the international market, much more than I ever would have thought. Now I think things are starting to shift a bit. I don't know if you agree or
Yeah. I'll quickly speak to it, Dee. So part of my job is strategic planning for the company. And so what I noticed early on and before we really started moving, we started with the film production side of the company, not the Indie Sparks. And so when the pandemic happened, we switched that. We were going to do that a little bit later. So what we noticed is the big houses have shut out, they were shutting out these independent companies, and that meant globally as well. And they were producing and keeping the relationships with either their product or with the larger production studios. And so, and that meant as well globally. So when the pandemic hit, they scrambled. The smaller independent houses had stuff going on already. They just kind of ignored the stuff, and they are still looking for content. But what they started to do is they started to look a little bit at Nollywood. You'll start to see a little bit of Nollywood on Netflix and some on Apple. And they also started looking in France. And so you'll see a lot of French films a lot of times. Yeah. But they have limited amount. They have some Bollywood type of stuff on there, but they have limited amounts. They're making relationships, but they're not doing it. They're making it with the larger Nollywood studios, larger Bollywood studios, and they're still shutting out those other guys that they kind of want to do things with. And so they're not doing what they said. They're going to do that, in my opinion, for a certain amount of time. And they're going to turn around and go back to, I think, their old model is what I think they're going to do. But that's just my opinion. So we already are looking and talking to the African market. We're already talking to the Indian market and trying to solidify some of those relationships, as well as the suppliers. The distributors are looking big time. They just want the content. They don't care where it comes from. So there's plenty of relationships to be developed with that, and to capitalize on that. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you. It got more long-winded as I was talking, but
oh no, you're welcome. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
So we have just a few moments. I want to make sure everybody's time is respected. So we're gonna wrap up probably right at 7, and I want to do a quick raffle. But I would like to first thank the panelists for sharing their time with us. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the insight, and I'm going to give each of you just a moment to share 1 or 2 things that you would encourage those that are in the STEM field to do to cultivate their creativity.
I would say, I always say network, sharing your ideas. As Sade had mentioned, like finding the gaps of where you clearly see you would like to see more of. 9 times out of 10, when you're thinking that, man, I wish we had this, I wish we could do this, it's a lot of people out there that's thinking the same thing. We just don't act on it. We just think, oh, it's going to take me a lot to get this moving. So the idea just comes and goes. But just, getting in, different meetups, different groups, ideation, just sharing your ideas and ways that we can solve problems. A lot of the technology, a lot of things that's built today is because people acted on their thoughts of how they can solve their problem. So just, I would say networking, and don't feel like it's a dumb, I guess, question, solution, or people already are doing this. And do your research, and network and see if that's, something that's out there of interest. Like when you think about Spark Studio, you see so many people that have created films, but they have to upload it to Vimeo or YouTube to get people to look at it. But then how many of those really go somewhere? Everybody is out there trying to get so many likes. They're trying to get, whatever they share, they want it to go viral. But it's so many different things that can help us in our day-to-day lives, or, whatever it may be. Just being able to, I say, be bold, share your voice, speak up, and act on those things, and, just put their passion and network to push it out there to solve their problem.
I would say that you should not hide behind or take refuge behind the process. And because there are plenty of processes in place that'll tell you when to work and when not to work, when to create and when not to. And please don't hide behind the process, and don't ever let anyone tell you no. There is so much creativity within engineering. Immediately I think of Leonardo da Vinci, and I think about other great engineers. And Da Vinci was really an artist and engineer all combined. And there are so many other people they may not have been Da Vinci, but they were very creative in the way that they operated. And I think the rewards can be tremendous.
I love everything that I just heard. And I'll add that when you feel like you are just doing a monotonous job every day, and you're just creating a framework, and you're wondering if that wander dips in there anytime, that's that creative space that's telling you to do more, to do something different. So challenge yourself to not stick to what I say, saving the world from ordinary. It's because if you're thinking you're ordinary, you already are not, because your individualism makes you different. And so your creativity is only limited by your beliefs. And so take your step further than you think you can. You guys are awesome. To me, it's kind of like the bones and everything that makes you work inside. And so when you put on that shirt, you got a purple shirt on over here, you got a blue shirt on, that makes your individual, yourself, makes you unique. You're already unique. So step outside that everyday thinking into something that is outside of, be unframeable, I guess. Be unframeable.
I've seen so many ideas where people actually acted on those ideas. One, for instance, that I was just running across today, and it was like, how you see more clothing that has Black faces on it, or pajamas. I saw this recently. It was pajamas that has Black faces on it. And, how inspiring is that for our kids to see, like, they can put on clothes that actually is people that look like them. But anyway, and then even the hair products, right? It's hard to find, like, it's not as hard today, but even the people who found it, like, it's a hairline on Amazon specifically for people of color. So, I mean, it's just so many different ideas that I'm so proud to see that people acted on that. They saw a problem, they saw the gap, and they went out there and made it happen.
I have to say one more thing really quickly. Take time for yourself, because I am guilty of myself, as I'm helping so many people do their ideas.
Yeah.
And they keep coming out of my head, helping them. I have no problem, because that's what I'm good at, strategizing. But my own ideas, I have some of my own, and I'm not necessarily doing that. And that idea could probably, I have no doubt, could save some lives. So I need to do my thing. So take time for yourself, get rid of the clutter if you need to. But give yourself some grace when you need to as well. So that would be my last thing.
Love it. I love
I'm
it.
I'm so gratified to be in y'all's presence, by the way. This is awesome, awesome, awesome to me. If I had this when I was younger, oh my goodness, where I would have been then. So, but there are no coincidences in time. So, but I appreciate being here today.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I wish I had a forum like this, you know, over the years. I mean, I appreciate it now, and I think I will benefit from it today going forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And again, we appreciate and the experiences and the authenticity and genuineness of your experiences. And I know that I'll be taking a few things to the next week and making sure I get it done.
Can I be an
So-
honorary engineer? I just want to.
Oh, you're there. You're there already. You're there already. You are fully inducted. So I want to thank everybody for sticking with us. We're going to do a quick couple more raffles. Make sure you hang around to get your info on here.